Roughly about this time last year, the start of 2023, we covered a story that said, look, councils, not only just in England, but also in the UK as well, are going to be coming under increased pressure for funding. Now, why was this? Well, ultimately, this is austerity really coming home to roost. And this isn't the first time that this has sort of happened. Now, the Tories in the past make a big song and dance when Birmingham City Council announced that it was going bankrupt. But as we've said and we explained, the reason why it was going to go bankrupt was because it had these historic pay disputes that had been going on for quite some time, and that those were piling up, and that was eating into its funding. You combine that with inflation, the rising cost of all these different services and things that it's got to do. Something had to break. And unfortunately, this is now pretty much the story for all English councils, that you can be perfectly fine, but if you get a sudden increase in or sudden demand for use in services, maybe something comes along. There's a lot of people being talking about recently about these flooding problems that have happened. That seems to have also be pushing some councils to the brink, because now they're being told, well, now you've got to go spend all this money on flood defenses, but they'll turn around and go, well, hold on, guys, if we're going to spend money on flood defenses, you've got to give us the money first to be able to do it. And of course, there was a clip now circulating with Andy Burnham, and you have this Tory going, "Oh, but you're implementing these ULEZ things in Manchester. How dare you?" And Andy Burnham goes, "Well, no, hold on a second. Let's be honest about what's happening here. You are telling us we've got to implement these ULEZ schemes. It's your idea. You're the government who's passed it, who's told us to implement these schemes. Now we're passing it. Now you're turning around. No, that's not good enough." And he went through several other things as well. But especially he addressed the funding issue, that you have cut and cut and cut funding for councils in England so severely that now many councils are facing real bankruptcy problems. Leeds, one in particular. We've talked about that. Nottingham. We've talked about Coventry as well. But it's not just Labour-led councils. It is Conservative ones. This is now pushing Conservatives to the wall, where out of nowhere, all of a sudden, all these Tory MPs, from Robert Jerrick, Priti Patel, Liz Truss, all of them who voted and said, yeah, we should cut funding for local councils, now turn around and go, oh, yeah, we've cut funding too much. This is threatening our own local councils who are Conservative run, and yeah, it's going to cause a big problem for us. And on top of this, now we have, according to these reports, and we'll get into this in a moment, 40 Tory rebel MPs who are threatening to rebel over funding for English councils. Like, you are not funding councils good enough. Well, remember, you've got that infamous clip of Rishi Sunak to play. I changed the funding formula to take all that funding away from the councils that needed it to give it to more affluent areas. Wow, that's going to play really well at the upcoming general election, isn't it? But anyway, we'll get into this, because this is just a fascinating story of austerity coming home to roost, and Tory MPs now realizing, oh, that's all our fault. We can't blame anyone else for this. This is all on us. And of course, all of a sudden, these Tory MPs suddenly find, when councils have been facing this problem now for well over more than a year, this is a very long, term problem that councils have been facing. All of a sudden, these Tory MPs would turn around and go, actually, funding local councils might actually be a good year, especially in an election year. But anyway, before we do get onto this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's, of course, the Pony Club as well. And of course, thank you very much to everyone who does and help and support the channel, even if you do just click the like and share button. So let's crack on into this. This coming from The Guardian reporting on this morning. So, with more than 40 Tory MPs now threatening rebellion over English council funding. So, more than 40 Conservative MPs, including 7 former cabinet ministers, have now threatened Rishi Sunak with a fresh Commons rebellion after writing to demand more funding for English councils to avoid deep cuts to services, warning that urgent action was required to ensure that there would be that they would back the government crunch vote next month. The MPs from all wings of the party said that extra financial support was needed to prevent more councils going bust amid a 40 billion funding shortfall. Growing numbers of councils across England warn that they now face effective bankruptcy amid soaring costs of rising pressures on services. This is compounded by years of austerity-driven cuts and local missteps. Again, some councils aren't blameless when they do this. You know, these missteps have happened, but it has been really years of austerity that has been doing this. I think it's sort of wrong to say, oh, yeah, austerity-driven cuts, local missteps. Yes, there have been some councils who have invested in stuff and it has gone completely belly up. That is true, but that is not the majority case. That is the very, very much the exception when it has happened. So amongst the biggest casualties so far are, of course, Birmingham, Nottingham, as well as Woking, Surrey, and of course Thurrock in Essex. The letter that was coordinated by the City Council's network among the County All Parliamentary Group warned that millions of people in traditionally safe Tory seats, gee, I wonder why they care so much now face a double whammy of cuts to local services and higher council tax rates. And this is the other thing as well, when conservatives, like mainline conservatives, in the government complain about councils having to raise tax. It's because their funding has been cut so much. That's the only option they've got. And yet the Tory MPs, many of these councillors, balk at the idea. We've had many Tory councillors in the Red Wall who have been, gone to, opened up huge salvos on like Labour-run councils up in the north because they've had to increase council tax because, the Conservative government has cut their funding. Inflation is massively driving up the cost of services. There is an increase in demand for a lot of services as well. So this is causing a huge problem. Huge problem. It is essentially a complete perfect storm. This is all coming together now. And it is the Tories who are responsible for this. They are reaping what they have sown for decades. So the senior figures who, of course, signed this letter include the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jerrick, who voted against the government over the Rwanda deal, and, of course, former cabinet ministers, such as Priti Patel, Theresa Coffey, Damien Green, and, of course, Brendan Lewis. As the local government secretary under Boris Johnson, Jerrick had been responsible for council funding before he was replaced by Michael Gove in 2021. And did he raise this as an issue? Did he raise council funding? No, he didn't. The former local government ministers were also signatories, including Jake Berry, the former Tory Party chair. Ministers are now consulting on the financial statement for the local government funding, which will determine how much support councils in England will receive for 2024 to 2025, due for a vote in Parliament in early February. In December, ministers announced a 46 billion funding package for English councils, an increase of 6.5% on the amount a year earlier. However, local government leaders warn that the plan is insufficient to prevent more councils from going bust and is now reliant on authorities pushing through a 5% council tax increase. Representing over 37 county and unitarian authorities across England, the County Council Network has said that members were facing an extreme financial pressure and were tracked to overspending over £650 million this year. And with these councils facing a total of over £4 billion funding deficit over the next 3 years. Writing a letter to Sunak, the 44 Conservative MPs, alongside one Liberal Democrat and one Labour, threatened to vote against the government, saying that there is still an opportunity left to try and rectify the situation and ensure that MPs are able to support the vote on local government settlement within the House of Commons in early February. We would therefore urge you to do all you can to find local government financing settlements to provide additional funding for local government to ensure that councils in our areas can continue to provide the services that our residents are dependent upon a regular basis. Spokesperson for the government said that he's now considering the response carefully. In its consultation on the funding settlement, councils are ultimately responsible for their own finances, but we remain ready to talk to any concerned party about its financial position. And remember, this is their own fault. This is their, this is their own, you know, this is the ghost of Christmas past coming back to, or should we say, the ghost of George Osborne coming back to haunt the modern Tory party, rattling their chains, rattling his chains as he goes. But this is it. This is the case of what is happening. It has now, austerity has very much firmly come home to roost. And you are seeing a lot of people talk now. The fact that we have had, when you look back across the past just 10 years of Tory rule, not even the whole period of Tory rule, just like the past 10 years, there are a lot of people talking now about the lost decade. That under the Tories, we have completely lost a decade of growth because it has stagnated under them. They have failed to deliver really any economic benefits to the UK. If anything, they've really tarnished it. And not only just that, but Brexit as well has a lot to feed into that as well. They have not invested in the UK. They have not invested in vital industries. And that going on for 10 years, that is all on them. They have no one to blame. They can't blame a previous Labour administration. They can't blame, you don't understand, it was the Lib Dems when they were in coalition. Just 10 years alone covers their time period where they were fully in charge, when they were in control. They've got no one to blame but themselves. And yet this is the reality of what they have done, what they have said. So, yeah, shocking that, shall we say, they also discover this in a general election year as well. But yeah, many of these, of course, Tories now in these safe seats, now very, very worried because, as the Liberal Democrats have shown, yeah, your seat not exactly safe. So again, general election going to be very, very, very fun. And one thing we should also mention, a lot of councils, especially along the route of HS2, invested thousands of pounds, sometimes millions, into this route because they were going to get a direct benefit from it. Now that HS2 is gone, so has all that benefit as well. Instead, we've got to rely on Rishi Rail, which essentially means nothing at this point. Like I said before, this isn't the Northern Network project, it's the Northern Network suggestions, a whole group of ideas that some never even going to get off the ground, let alone actually be built unless, the government commits funding to them. Instead, the money gets spent on potholes in London. What an idea to improve the Northern Network. Fill those potholes down in London. So, as always, thank you very much, of course, for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.